What if I told you that people who respond quickly to questions aren't smarter than you? They've just figured out how to answer questions when they are put on the spot. And once you learn the tips, you will never feel nervous when someone asks you a direct question at work. Because as an instructor at Columbia University and someone who has spoken on stages to hundreds and thousands of people around the world, I figured out how to communicate seamlessly with no script, no second takes. And what I have realized is this has nothing to do with your intelligence or technical knowledge. It all has to do with how you think about responding and how you think on your feet, which is why I'm excited to share for the very first time the 4 things that completely changed how I think about communications and how I think on my feet when someone asks me a question. And the best part about it, the confidence. The confidence of not freezing when someone asks me a question. No more rambling, no more watching people's eyes glaze over, no more walking out of a meeting where I'm thinking, why did I just say that? Your communications will turn calm, clear, and confident. Because in this video, I'm going to take you through the exact journey of how I figured this out, the real turning points, the research behind why it works, and what you can start doing differently today. In fact, all of this can be found in my best-selling communications book called Smart Not Loud: How to Get Noticed at Work for All the Right Reasons, where I teach smart and ambitious professionals like you how to position yourself so you get the best opportunities at work without needing to be loud, aggressive, or obnoxious about it. Because I want to be clear about one thing. I was not someone who naturally communicated clearly. Standing on a stage like this, no way. I could never imagine it. In fact, early in my career when I was working on TV, someone asked me a question. And I remember that time, my whole body tensed up. My heart started pounding so fast. And my face, well, it was really obvious that I was like a deer in a headlights. But what I learned was that communicating is a skill. And if I learned how to think clearer, I could speak clearer. And that's exactly what I did. And after working almost 10 years on TV and winning an Emmy Award for it, I'm excited to now share with you exactly how you can speak this way too. In fact, I want you to make sure you listen to the 3rd part in this video, because what I did there was the one that completely changed and transformed everything for me. And I really think it might do the same for you. So here's the first thing. The first thing I did to think faster and speak clearer at work, I stopped rushing to answer, and I learned the power of the pause. Now, let me take you back to one of my first moments when I was working on TV. I was a young reporter, and I remember standing in front of the camera, the bright lights on me, and an earpiece in my ear where I could hear the anchor ask me a question live on TV. Suddenly, I heard a question where I literally had no idea how to answer it. And so what did I do? I just started talking and talking and talking, and it was a huge mess. It didn't make any sense. I was talking in circles. I was using a ton of filler words, and it was the most honestly embarrassing thing on live TV. I remember driving home that night just feeling so embarrassed, so cringy, and I remember when I got home, I started to think, what was going on with me? What was my problem? I needed to figure this out fast because there were definitely going to be more situations like that. So what did I do? I started watching. I started noticing how all the more veteran, well-spoken people, how they answered questions, and it shocked me. The best communicators, they never rushed. They took a beat, a real noticeable pause. And here's the thing. It didn't make them look slow. It actually made them look thoughtful, in control, executive presence, all of that. In fact, there's science behind this. Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman spent his career studying two modes of thinking. It's what he calls System 1. That's fast, automatic, reactive thinking, and it's what blurts out. But System 2 is slower, logical, and that's what matters. When you answer instantly under pressure, you're basically handing the microphone over to your System 1 thinking. But you build a 2 to 3 second pause. System 2 of your brain comes online. And that part of your brain is what can organize your thoughts into a clear answer. And that's the thing. You actually have to give yourself the time to pause to activate the System 2. So here's what I would want you to do. The next time you get a question, right, especially one that catches you off guard, I really want you to pause on purpose. But if you're like, oh my gosh, it's going to make me look stunned, this is what I want you to do. Nod your head like you're thinking, because that is a visual cue that you heard the question. And then a few seconds later, you say, that's an interesting question. And here's how I think about this. That one sentence buys your brain a few more seconds, and it allows that System 2 to give a coherent and smart answer. It's simple and it's so powerful, which now brings me to my next point. The second thing I learned to think faster and speak clearer at work was to lead with the headline. One of my most favorite parts about my job today, leading the company Soulcast Media, is really traveling around the world and facilitating communication workshops with teams and organizations who want to build communications into their culture. And whenever I start to lead a room, I always make sure that I lead with a headline. And this is a deliberate exercise and challenge to figure out what is the most important part that I want people to understand about this workshop. Because right now, what I often see people do in meetings is when somebody asks them a question, any question, they jump into reacting. And then they spill out all the answers like it's a huge brain dump. Now, the problem with that is no one understands the point you're making. Everyone is just kind of sitting there staring at you, wondering, what are you trying to say? And that is why thinking faster and speaking clear really starts with understanding what's the headline. What's the most important part? What are you trying to say? Here's the research that explains why this matters so much. Psychologists have known for over a century about something called the primacy effect. In a study, they found that people most strongly remember what they heard first, meaning whatever you say in your first sentence is what people are most likely to retain. So when you spend your first sentence on background, you're spending your most valuable real estate on your least valuable information. And I often tell people, if you cannot capture people's attention in the very beginning, how do you expect them to listen in the middle of your presentation? In fact, even the military has a name for this. It's called BLUF, B-L-U-F, bottom line up front. And that means answer first, reason second, background later. So instead of, well, this project in March, well, there were some vendor delays and then the team pivoted, right? Instead of talking like that, when your boss asks you, how's it going? You say, we're on track to launch in 2 weeks. You see, simple, to the point, and you led with the most important part of what people want to know. So here's what I want you to do. In your next meeting, when someone asks you a question, I want you to force your very first sentence to be that top line answer. You can, of course, pause like we just talked about, but then you start off your first few sentences with the most important part. And I guarantee when you do this, you will see the transformation immediately. You do this and you will start to capture people's attention and keep them engaged the whole time. It's amazing. Now, this brings me to my next point. And remember, this is the one that changed everything for me. By the way, if you're loving this video, don't forget to hit subscribe right now. As an instructor at Columbia University and a best-selling author, I really am committed to helping you think faster and speak clearer so you can start to be perceived as that leader you are. I drop a new video every week here, so subscribe to ensure you never miss a video. So here's the third thing that I learned to start to think faster and speak clearer at work. And that was to stop thinking in words and start thinking in buckets. I want you to visualize this right now. Imagine that there are 3 buckets sitting on a table. Each bucket has a function. What happened, what it means, what's next. Now, in your communications, as you answer a question, you need to answer it in these 3 ways. What happened, what it means, what next. Now, here's a structure that if you were to do this in practice, this is what it would sound like. So let's say you're sitting in a status update meeting and your director suddenly turns to you and asks, hey, where are we on the vendor issue? Now, most people in that moment will start sharing and oversharing and talking and sometimes not even stopping, leaving everyone wondering, what is the update? So that's not good. But watch what happens when you start to think in buckets. So remember, you have your headline, then you say, what happened? The vendor missed Friday's delivery deadline. Bucket 2, what it means, which means our launch timeline is at a risk of slipping about a week. Bucket 3, what's next? So I've set up a call with them tomorrow to lock in a recovery date, and I will update you all by Thursday. That's it. 15 seconds. Calm, clear, complete. Same information, but completely different delivery because the structure did the work. In fact, just last month, Marcus, who's in our Present by Soulcast program, he used this exact strategy in one of our group coaching calls where I was teaching a new communication skill and I challenged Marcus to think in these buckets and taught him to structure his communications in this way so people could quickly understand him. So Marcus, he's a senior financial analyst, and honestly, he's one of the smartest people in his department. In the past, he used to just data dump all this information. But now, when I pretended to be his manager, I asked him the question, well, Marcus, can you tell me why we should go with your financial recommendation? Well, he answered it this way. He said, sure. Here's what happened. Our current vendor raised their pricing this quarter, which puts us over budget by Q4, especially if nothing changes here. But here's what this means. Staying on this path is going to cost us significantly more than we planned. So here's what I think is next. I recommend we split the contract across 2 vendors, and I've run the numbers already, and I can walk the team through the transition by Friday. What I loved about Marcus's answer is he made it even more clear by saying, here's what happened, here's what it means, and here's what's next. And you can absolutely do this too. And by the way, there's amazing research on why this bucket strategy works so well. Psychologist Nelson Cowan found that our working memory, the mental space that we use to hold a thought, can only hold about 3 to 4 chunks of information at a time. 3 to 4. That's it. So when you try to hold and then talk about 10 different points, you really are going to lose your audience. So the 3 buckets, that's what keeps it memorable. Now, this now goes into my final point here. The 4th thing I did and I learned to speak faster and speak more clearly at work was my nerves, not my brain, was what made me feel like I was slow. Think about that. And I will tell you, this is the one I'm most embarrassed to say. Because I'll tell you, for years, I thought that some people who were really well-spoken, I just thought that they were born to be razor sharp. And I told myself that story like I'm just not going to be one of them because in high-pressure moments, my mind would literally just go blank. Now, I remember one big presentation early in my career where I knew my materials in and out. I prepared this for days. And the moment all eyes turned to me, it was like somebody just unplugged my brain. And I stumbled through that presentation, which afterwards I thought, what the heck is wrong with me? But here's what I didn't understand back then. Nothing was wrong with my thinking or my preparation, But something was wrong with my nerves and anxiety and what it was doing to my thinking. There's a powerful study on exactly this, published in the journal Science by researchers Gerardo Ramirez and Cian Balak. Now, they studied students before high-pressure exams, and they found that anxiety literally occupies our working memory. Basically, your worries take up the exact mental space you need for thinking. But here's the crazy part about the study. Students who spent just 10 minutes writing down their worries before the exam performed much better. So simply getting the worries out of your head and onto paper freed up their working memory, and it affected the way they showed up. So for you, before any high stakes meeting, presentation, or difficult conversation, do this brain dump on paper. Write down what you're worried about. What if they push back? What if I blank out? What if I ramble? Write it down. And that writing takes away that worry. And then you structure it into the 3 buckets we talked about before, so that when you walk into your next meeting, you know exactly what to do. And here's what I want you to know. Thinking faster was never about intelligence. For me, it was about really unlearning those 4 things that had been really affecting me, and I've been doing it wrong for years. So now I stopped rushing to answer, and I learned to pause, because that's a real power move. It's not a weakness. I now also learned to lead with the most important part, your headline, because that first sentence is your most valuable. And I also stopped thinking in this brain dumping way, and I started to think about my answers in buckets. I also learned that my nerves, not my brain, were what was making me slow. And just that 5 minutes of preparation, clearing my head, makes a huge difference. By the way, none of this requires you to need to work harder. It doesn't require you to have to be louder. It just requires you to think smarter in your approach. And that's really what I talk about in my book, Smart Not Loud. So if this entire video resonated with you, share this with someone in your life who has brilliant ideas, but hasn't yet found the strategy or ways to say them with confidence, because this video teaches you exactly how to do that. Now, if you want to go deeper on any of these tips, my book, Smart Not Loud, is linked below. And if you want a free guide on thinking and speaking clearly under pressure, just comment the word SMART below, and I'll send you a link to download it immediately. And don't forget to like and subscribe, because as an instructor, it's really important for me to continue to share this knowledge with you and to make sure you never miss a video as well, because my job is to help you get promoted, build visibility, and of course, communicate with confidence at work. I look forward to seeing you in our next video.